The boy's scream tore through the cold morning air like glass shattering in silence. "Papa, that's my mama." The motorcycle skidded slightly as the man hit the brakes harder than he ever had in his life. The roar of the engine died instantly, but the echo of the child's voice kept ringing in his ears, louder than any machine he had ever ridden. His gloved hands tightened around the handlebars, frozen, not from the winter air, but from something far deeper. If you believe that even the coldest hearts can change, and that kindness deserves a second chance, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel, Only Kindness. Because stories like this remind us that humanity still lives in the most unexpected places. The road stretched empty under the pale winter sun, cutting through a quiet town that barely stirred awake. Frost clung to the edges of sidewalks, and the wind carried that bitter stillness that only early mornings knew. Ahead, a small crowd had gathered near the curb. People stood in hesitant circles, whispering, not daring to step closer. Ronan Hale, known across highways and forgotten towns as a hardened member of the Hells Angels, had seen accidents before. He had ridden past broken bodies, twisted metal, and scenes most people couldn't stomach. But something about the way his son, Elias, clutched his jacket, trembling and pointing forward, made his chest tighten. Ronan swung his leg off the bike slowly, his boots hitting the ground with a heavy thud. Elias didn't let go of him. The boy's small fingers dug into the leather, as if afraid that if he let go, everything would disappear. The closer Ronan got, the quieter the world became. The murmurs faded, the cold air thickened, and then he saw her. She lay on the pavement, still as the frost that had begun to gather around her hair. Her coat was thin, too thin for the weather, and her face was pale in a way that didn't belong to the living. One hand rested near her chest, the other stretched outward, as if she had reached for something, or someone. Ronan stopped breathing. His past, his regrets, and every choice he had ever made crashed into him all at once. Because he knew that face. Years ago, before the roaring engines, before the brotherhood, before the hardened shell that wrapped around him like armor, there had been a woman who believed he could be more than what the world had decided he was. Her name was Marisol Vance. And she had once loved him. The boy's voice broke again, softer now, shaking with confusion and fear. Elias had never seen his mother, not really. Only in old, worn photographs that Ronan kept hidden deep inside a metal box, away from questions he didn't want to answer. But children knew things in ways adults couldn't explain. Elias knew. Ronan dropped to his knees beside her. The cold seeped instantly through his jeans, but he didn't feel it. His trembling hands hovered over her, unsure, afraid to touch her as if she might break, or worse, as if she already had. Memories flooded him. The last time he had seen her, she had been standing in a doorway, tears streaking her face, telling him that she couldn't follow him into that life. That she wouldn't raise a child around danger, violence, and uncertainty. And he had let her go. Not because he didn't love her, but because he thought she deserved better. Years passed. The roads called him. The club became his family. And the pain of losing her buried itself under layers of speed, noise, and silence. Until now, a faint sound snapped him back. Barely audible. A breath. Ronan's head jerked forward. His heart slammed violently against his ribs. He leaned closer, his ear near her lips. There it was again. Weak, fragile, but alive. "She's breathing," he said, his voice hoarse, almost unrecognizable. The crowd stirred. Someone rushed to call for help. Another person stepped forward with a blanket. But Ronan was already moving, carefully lifting her into his arms as if she weighed nothing at all. Elias clung to his side, tears streaming silently down his face. The ride to the hospital blurred into a haze of desperation. Ronan had never driven so fast with so much fear gripping him. Every second felt like a countdown he couldn't control. When they finally arrived, the world shifted into sharp urgency. Nurses rushed her away. Doors swung open and shut. Questions were asked, but Ronan barely heard them. He stood in the hallway, his massive frame suddenly feeling small, helpless. Elias sat beside him, clutching his hand tightly. Hours passed. Each minute stretched like an eternity. For the first time in years, Ronan wasn't thinking about the road ahead, or the next ride, or the loyalty he owed to his brothers. He was thinking about the past, the choices that led him here, and the woman fighting for her life behind those doors. When the doctor finally stepped out, Ronan's entire body tensed. "She's alive," the doctor said first, and the words alone nearly brought him to his knees. "Severe hypothermia, exhaustion, and she's been malnourished for some time. But she's a fighter." Ronan exhaled a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. Alive. That was all that mattered. Days turned into a quiet vigil. Ronan rarely left the hospital. His presence drew stares, leather vest, tattoos, the unmistakable aura of a man people were taught to fear. But none of that mattered anymore. Elias stayed close, often sitting beside the bed, watching the woman who was both a stranger and something deeply familiar. When Marisol finally opened her eyes, the room felt like it had stopped breathing. Her gaze was weak at first, unfocused. Then it landed on Ronan. And everything changed. Recognition flickered. Shock followed. Then something softer, something that had never truly disappeared. Ronan didn't speak immediately. For once in his life, he didn't have the words. But he didn't need them. Because sometimes, silence carried more truth than anything spoken. Recovery wasn't easy. It took weeks before she could stand, longer before she could walk without assistance. And even longer before the emotional walls between them began to crumble. Ronan learned things he never knew. That life hadn't been kind to her after she left. That she had struggled, fought, survived in ways he couldn't imagine. And that despite everything, she had never stopped loving him. The realization hit harder than any blow he had ever taken. Because he had spent years convincing himself that leaving her was the right thing to do. But now, standing beside her again, watching Elias slowly bond with the mother he had just found, Ronan began to question everything. The man he had become. The life he had chosen. And the future he still had time to change. One afternoon, as sunlight streamed gently through the hospital window, Elias laughed, a pure, joyful sound that filled the room in a way nothing else could. Marisol smiled, her hand resting on the boy's hair. And Ronan stood there, watching, his chest tightening with something unfamiliar. Hope. If this story has touched your heart even a little, don't scroll away. Take a second to like, share, and let others feel this moment too. Because sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness spread the farthest. Ronan didn't know what came next. But for the first time in years, he wanted to find out. Not alone, but with them, together. Before this story ends, leave a comment saying, "Second chances matter," if you believe people can change and love can find its way back. Because sometimes, the coldest moments lead to the warmest beginnings. And sometimes, the people we think we've lost forever are just waiting for us to find the courage to come back.